that some of them is a newer trend and some of it is in lower cost of living areas. Um, that has
I'm noticing the same thing. It's almost as if he called the house and asked his mother what I was going to be wearing to work and wanted to dress up just like me.
The laptop I was on, Tom, it connected to your earbuds, your iPods.
Welcome to episode 65. Today we are talking about the housing market, Brittany Griner, and more lightning round questions at the end. Lately, the housing market has been experiencing many conflicting signals. Demand has tumbled, but supply of homes is still low. Prices have fallen, but are well above their pre-pandemic levels. Interest rates are sky high compared to where they were a year ago, but below where they stood in the decades when many older Americans bought their first homes. What do you think is going on in the housing market, and what do you think will happen next?
Well, the housing market's a tough thing to cover in a minute or two. But there's a couple things going on right now, just related to what you were saying, that some of them is a newer trend and some of it is an older trend. So what we've been seeing over the last going on a decade now is some people have called it the blue state exodus, but in general, you've seen an increasing amount of relocation out of major metros and into smaller and mid-sized cities in lower cost of living areas. That began, like I said, before COVID, about a decade ago, but COVID just put the accelerator down to the floor for this trend. So there's a reason, for example, why a state like Tennessee, with Memphis and Nashville as the metros there, is the fastest growing state in the country, and why like Boise, Idaho is the fastest growing metropolitan area in the country. This is, again, due to a variety of reasons. You started to see an increase in crime and a softer on-crime policy from many of these bigger cities' governments. COVID made it very clear that a handful of health officials could basically ruin your life. And for a variety of other reasons, people just decided they had to get out of there. So we started seeing that. And since these places had higher costs of living anyways, let's say you come from Seattle, you sell a 4-bed, 2-bath suburban Seattle home for $1 million, and then you show up in a place like Boise or in, somewhere in Montana or whatever, and the house costs a third of that. You can bid 50 to 100K over and pocket the difference, and you don't care. That's not great for the people who live there, but that's been going on increasingly for a while. You also mentioned interest rates, though. Low rates made it easy for people to borrow, but since people don't really shop for a house based on the full price of the house, they shop on monthly payment. Lower rates usually tend to mean higher prices, because the relationship is inverse. I won't go too much into it to save some time here, but lower the rate, the higher the price is typically what you see. Because of that relationship, though, as rates come up, values go down for homes. Well, guess what? If you bought the peak, now you're underwater. You can't sell. That leads to, a tightening of inventory, even though demand is also slowing as well. So, even with slowing demand, you still see home prices, especially in places that are targets of relocation, continue to be resilient, unlike what they are in major metros. Even before COVID, you saw in like 50 out of 60 of the largest metro areas, home prices were already declining, and that's continued through the COVID area, and now especially that interest rates are going up. So I'll go ahead and sum that up with, there's been a growing exodus out of major metros into small and mid-sized areas. Cheaper borrowing costs accelerated that trend for some people, and now that rates are coming up, people are underwater, aren't selling, can't sell. So just a bad situation all around. I don't, a year from now, who knows what the housing market will look like. But for now, assuming there's no major economic problems in this country, we might be approaching a floor. Maybe we come down 20%, who knows. But when rates start coming down, you'll probably start seeing all those trends just reemerge. So I'll stop there.
So I think right now there's obviously the housing market's going down, and I don't think it's a supply issue. There's still houses on the markets. People are still willing to sell. I think what it boils down to is an affordability issue and also a timing issue. Now, in terms of affordability, interest rates are rising faster than home prices are falling. So people are being priced out of buying the homes that they would otherwise buy. And as far as timing goes, I think we're in this weird nebulous period where buyers are waiting for the bottom of the market. I heard Alex mention that. When home prices are going up, swaths of buyers jump in, whether they're that's the beginning of the rally, the middle of the rally, or the end of the rally. As long as you get in the rally, you win. But when home prices are falling, if you jump in the beginning, middle, the end, you lose. So what we're seeing is a lot of these potential buyers are sitting on the sidelines and they're just waiting till there's some indication that the home prices have bottomed out. And once there's an indication there, then I think we'll see the market pick back up. But this is just normal housing market behavior. It cycles just like anything else.
I remember when I was like 15 and I would get to school and I would see that my kid brother was wearing exactly the same t-shirt to school that I was wearing. And now that I'm looking at Drew behind my shoulder, I'm noticing the same thing. It's almost as if he called the house and asked his mother what I was going to be wearing to work and wanted to dress up just like me. But back to the question about housing market is that if you have cash and you can buy a house without borrowing money, you should have an opportunity now to get some pretty good deals that didn't exist a couple of years ago. But for everybody else, which is 97% of home purchasers, it's kind of a nebulous time. Is you don't know exactly what's going to happen. You may have to sell your house at a loss, hoping to find another house in a more popular area, as Alex alluded to, at an elevated price. I would say that in times like this, you just have to be a little bit more persistent and a little bit more creative. Is that if you want to buy a house, you're going to have to do a little extra work now where it might have been easier 6 months ago.
I think most people are just waiting at this point. I think there's a lot of demand out there that doesn't have to do anything right now. And if rates are, I think a lot of the mortgage stuff I read says that rates might come back down in 2024. So I think a lot of people have read that and are just sitting on cash and sitting on decisions until they think interest rates might come down. Because a lot of people that I've talked to think it's like a rubber band, and that the Federal Reserve is stretching the rubber band in terms of, interest rates are like at 6.5%, 7%. And what the consensus is that rubber band is going to snap, and those interest rates, while they may not come back down to to the mid twos, will still be a lot better than 6%. So I think there's a lot of waiting out there, and then I think there's a lot of people with cash just waiting around for somebody that is forced to sell their house on an unfavorable time for a discount, and they're using cash to come in and pick up a house cheaper than they would have got it 2 years ago. So I think both of those things are what's causing some pressure on prices, but also causing but not totally drying up demand for housing either. So I think there's a lot of waiting, and I think there's a lot of people with cash that are just still sitting on the sidelines waiting for somebody to put their house on sale. So but you're right. I mean, it is kind of a weird time, but I think the thing is that everybody's just waiting at this point.
I suspect that one of the primary drivers of current house costs was the pandemic. And there were people wanting to leave in these densely populated metropolitan areas where the only reason you live there is so you go to the museums and the professional sporting events and a lot of the other social opportunities that don't exist in rural areas. Well, when we were shut down and you couldn't do those things, it was a great impetus for families to move to someplace more rural. And there was a ton of PPP money and subsidy money that was poured into the economy. That drew prices up. I don't see those sorts of easy money trends continuing. So I think that the long-term thing is I think that real estate prices will come back down to where they should be, supported by the gross domestic product of our economy.
All right. Let's move on to the second question, which is women's basketball star Brittany Griner has been released from a Russian penal colony through a prisoner exchange for Russian arms dealer Victor Bout. Boot had been regarded as one of the world's leading arms traffickers, and he was rumored to have been the inspiration for the Hollywood movie Lord of War. He has spent more than a decade in U.S. prisons, to which he has been sentenced after being convicted of trying to sell weapons to Colombian rebels. Do you think this was a fair trade, Boot, for Griner?
Was it a fair trade? No. It's a pretty bad deal if you really think about it. A low-level drug offender for, one of the world's most prolific arms dealers of his day. That being said, I understand why it happened, simply because Brittany Griner is more of a celebrity in the United States than Victor Boot is. Nobody knows who this guy is, but Brittany Griner makes daily headlines because she's in prison. I get why it happened. She's clearly a political prisoner. I mean, a very, very minor offense, all things considered, yielded, over a decade, basically in a labor colony. So, on the one hand, do you really want to give up, now an ex-arms dealer? Probably not. But do you also want to leave, a low-level offender who is an American citizen to rot in a Russian penal colony? Also probably not. Don't like it, but I get why it happened.
I guess you have to kind of define what fair means. I don't think that prisoners in a swap have to have similar rap sheets. One of the great things about America is we really value our citizens, and we go through great lengths to protect our citizens. So if American is being detained overseas, I don't really care. I say bring them home at all costs. We want our citizens back home. Now, where I have an issue is she wasn't really next in line. Right now, there's 3 other Americans being detained in penal colonies in Russia, and they've been there for much longer. I guess if we're going to go there, I think that there's some intersectionality issues at play. And I think to the Biden administration, honestly, bringing home a Black lesbian female looks a lot better than bringing home someone else like Paul Whelan, who's been there for almost 5 years. So I think it's that's kind of the reason why she's garnered so much attention. It's a win. They can take a victory lap for doing that. But on the flip side of the coin, before people berate me through their computer screens, I think it just should be based on time spent. If Brittany Griner had been there for 5 years and Paul Whelan had just showed up this year, I say, Paul, wait your turn, buddy. Let's bring home Brittany. So I think she wasn't up to come home yet. I think we should have gone in order.
We have a divided government where the Republicans have a narrow edge in the House. It's the Democrats have a 51-49 edge in the Senate with a Democrat president. Nothing of substance is going to happen in the next 2 years. And in another year or so, we're going to start the campaign cycle again. The Democrats are going to have to come up with some candidate to put forward to vote for. It may or may not be President Biden. President Biden's going to have something he's going to show a year from now on what he's actually accomplished. And getting an intersectional candidate like Brittany Griner, hey, look, this is what I did for you, is going to be a lot better to stump for than I did absolutely nothing.
Well, what kind of makes you scratch? Sorry, I want to jump in again. What makes me scratch my head is he brought home who was it? Trevor Wells or something like that. He brought home another American earlier this year, and no one knows about it. But suddenly this is a big deal. Why?
Yeah, I mean, I just think it's kind of like you've already alluded to. It's a lot of publicity. Gosh, I can't even say that word. It's a lot of it's a lot of optics, as they like to say. But to Alex's point, I do kind of get why they made the trade, because apparently this Victor Boot. Yeah, I was talking to Drew about this. I get he was an arms dealer before and like I think in like the former Soviet Union through whenever Vladimir Putin took over. And basically, he was doing this in the days when you could pay the guard, $3,000 to go take a smoke break. And while he was out taking a smoke break, he wouldn't look in the weapons cache as Victor Boot was hauling out AK-47s. And by the time, he would take just enough time for Victor Boot to take, 10,000 AK-47s out of this weapons cache before the guard came back from a smoke break. And that's essentially how he operated his business. He would basically pay off guards and government officials, to basically just go somewhere for a little bit, so he could take some weapons out of these former Soviet buildings or whatever it was, and then he'd go sell them to anybody that would buy them, including the U.S. because they at some point did some deal with Victor Bout. But he's notorious for arming Colombians, arming people on both sides of global conflicts, and eventually the U.S. put him in jail. But the thinking is now is that he's been in jail for at least 10 years. The Russians, as many problems they have, they're a little bit more locked on to people just taking their equipment, especially now because they need it because they're running out of it, and so you can't really pay guards anymore or to do that. All of his contacts over the last 10, 15 years have dried up. So when you release this guy back out into the open, he doesn't have the same tools and the same opportunities that he did 10 to 15 years ago. So, I get his background, but I think they might be onto something when they're forward looking. I don't know if he's going to be able to reestablish himself as the arms dealer that he used to be. Maybe he will, but I think I don't think about this often and don't spend a lot of time in this world. But that thought process makes a lot of sense to me. But you're right. Why did Brittany Griner come home before anybody else? Yeah, I think people have already alluded to why. So, all right, let's go to the lightning rounds. Every year, the NASDAQ 100 index is designed to measure the performance of the largest NASDAQ-listed non-financial companies. And it rebalances every year to include those specific companies. This year, it will be adding Rivian, Warner Brothers, and Discovery to the index. How do you think the addition of these companies will affect the performance of the NASDAQ 100?
Well, for Warner Brothers, I believe Warner Brothers Discovery is now one company. Is that correct?
Correct, yes.
All right, yeah.
I think so. So Warner Brothers Discovery is going to join it. I think, that's an industry consolidation to try and help performance. So Warner Brothers Discovery, I see as a fine addition. Rivian is the more interesting one. Its stock since its IPO about a little over a year ago can be described, its performance anyways, can be described as a hot knife falling through butter. So I'm not really sure why you'd want to add Rivian. I think it's down like 80-something% since its IPO. Most analysts also don't look at Rivian very optimistically. There are a few contrarians out there who say that they're wrong, that it's underpriced right now. But why you'd want to add Rivian stock to anything at this point, based on past performance anyways, I really don't know. So I don't expect too much from Rivian, but Warner Brothers Discovery should be, a good choice.
I'm not sure why Rivian's in there either. I know that there's basically a committee. It's not just cut and dry based on your performance or size, whether you enter the NASDAQ 100. People actually have to choose. There's a qualification process. So how they got in there, I don't know. I didn't do my due diligence. Obviously they're suffering right now. So maybe, the 100th stock in the NASDAQ 100 was doing worse. I don't know. I think the important thing to remember is the NASDAQ is cap weighted, which basically boils down to your size represents your weight within the index. It's not 100 equally weighted companies. And with the NASDAQ 100, it's dominated by the top 10. So if Rivian and Warner continues to flop, they'll have a smaller weight. So I don't think it's going to have that big of an impact on the NASDAQ 100. It's just going to be like every other year. The winners will win, the losers will lose, and it will rebalance next year.
I think one of the criteria for getting in the NASDAQ is you have to have an average daily trading volume of more than 200,000 shares. So whether Rivian is doing well or not, if their daily average volume for trading is 200,000, it makes the cut. I don't think Rivian stock in and of itself, or even Warner Brothers Discovery stock in and of itself, is going to have an impact on the NASDAQ. What's really interesting is all the stocks that are being booted off the NASDAQ during the same time frame. So some of these stocks, evidently their trading volume has dropped to the point where they're no longer are valid in that index. So I think that'll have more of an impact on what goes on going forward.
Yeah, agreed. But to Drew's point, I think there's only 5 to 10 stocks that basically do like 85 to 90% of of moving most of the market. So you get like Apple, Google, Amazon, kind of like the FANG stocks, even though FANG's not what it used to be. But those large companies, those are the ones that move or cause most of the market movements. So adding a tiny bit of Rivian to the Nasdaq 100, I don't think is going to be a huge I don't think it's going to add that much more volatility to what's already in there. But
watch it be the next Tesla.
Yeah. Well, it's at that we see that meme where you get what is it? Is it Big Bird sitting at a corporate meeting? So you basically it used to be AMC. That was the Big Bird in the room next to a bunch of people wearing suits and in professional attire.
Can you throw that meme on there?
Yeah, I'll throw that one. And now the Big Bird in the room is Rivian. It's like, hey, what are you doing here? All right. So move on to the to important news that the DOJ is reportedly investigating whether Ticketmaster has monopoly in the ticket distribution market. So basically what happened here is that Ticketmaster faced a well-publicized backlash last month after its site crashed as Taylor Swift fans participated in a pre-sale of tickets for her Eras Tour concert, the first since 2018, so before the pandemic. The ticket company was forced to delay other pre-sales and eventually canceled the public sale for the tour. Several lawmakers responded with calls to break up Ticketmaster and the parent company Live Nation, which it merged with back in 2010. And then so you're basically getting pushback from Congress because they think Ticketmaster is a monopoly. Do you think Ticketmaster should be investigated over this kind of stuff? I mean, do you think it has a monopoly, and do you think it should be investigated?
No, I don't. I don't necessarily think they have a monopoly. They are very, heavily used by both venues and by performers to sell tickets. But there are alternatives out there that I think StubHub is a major one. Like there are other ticketing agents basically that they could use. That you would think that this kind of thing would be a lesson to use alternatives instead. If Ticketmaster was literally the only game in town and there weren't any other competitive companies out there that were capable of doing what they're doing, then, maybe under existing law, you can look at, breaking them up. But for now, I think the lesson that's learned is, if Ticketmaster can't handle it, go to one of their competitors, which there are competitors.
I think this just underscores the fact that you shouldn't be on the bad side of a Taylor Swift fan. I don't think that they're a monopoly either. I think maybe they just got in over their head. When Taylor Swift announced at this concert, people went crazy and they went nuts and they rushed to buy tickets. I think their system just crashed. Now, if they are a monopoly, then yeah, they should be investigated. If they didn't do anything wrong, then they'll be fine. But I think we see politicians just seeing their constituents as Taylor Swift fans or Swifties, and they say, hey, let's stand behind this and let's score some points and bring down Ticketmaster.
I agree with Drew. I think a lot of these politicians are standing around trying to find the next crisis so they can get in front of a CNN camera and say what they're going to do to try to solve the problem. When it comes to Taylor Swift fans, I don't think they're very forward-looking when they're calling on the federal government to solve this problem. If the idea is to try to get more tickets in the hands of people in a more judicious fashion, the last place you want to go for help is going to be a government agency and a team of investigators. Case in point would be the Bubba Wallace situation, where they sent a crack team of FBI agents to go determine what sort of violations of Bubba Wallace's civil rights took place when they found a garage door handle on the garage to his NASCAR NASCAR automobile.
Yeah, I don't think they should be investigated either. I was surprised to read about the tremendous demand for the Taylor Swift concert tour. Supposedly, Taylor Swift in order to satisfy all the demand that's out there for this tour, she would have to she would have to perform a concert every day for the next 2 years to satisfy all the pent-up demand there is to see her in concert. So that was shocking. That was more shocking to me than the DOJ getting investigated for. Or the Ticketmaster getting investigated for completely botching the sales. Supposedly, the Swift's company or whoever represents her warned Ticketmaster repeatedly, like, can you handle the demand? And I guess Ticketmaster was like, yes. they did not anticipate, as I did not anticipate, how much demand there would be for to see Taylor Swift. And frankly, I was knocking these questions out at like 1 a.m. last night, and I just decided to throw on her new album just to see what it was like, and I don't get it. Yeah. All right. So let's move on to the last one. So is that autonomous sensory meridian response, or ASMR, is known to produce a sensation of deep relaxation and promote enhanced sleep. And ASMR videos have become very popular on YouTube. Do you have any trouble falling asleep? And if you do you watch the ASMR videos? Alex?
No, I don't. Well, I don't really have too much issues falling asleep, but I have seen ASMR videos, and the ones that are made pretty well can be pretty relaxing. It is sometimes nice to just close your eyes and listen to the sound of like scratching on paper or like brushing on a microphone. It's kind of weird how it works. It can be pretty relaxing.
I never heard of it till today, and I don't have any issues falling asleep, thankfully, but I think those videos will do more harm. I think they'll keep me up at night. They creep me out. Honestly, the ones I watched were like people, you could hear like their mouth smacking noises and things like that. I thought they were weird, and I certainly won't be watching them.
I'm waiting for the videos that come out that help me stay awake. At this point, I don't have any difficulties going to sleep. It's staying awake. But rather than watch an ASMR video, I might just throw in another replay of The English Patient and have the same effect.
Yeah. So yeah, I was like kind of weirded out by it as well, and I found there is a subgenre in ASMR of financial ASMR, and there's particularly a channel that I recently subscribed to called Silent Stock. And this guy basically breaks down the balance sheet of companies, except he whispers it to you and like taps on the table and clicks his pen and does all kinds of like weird stuff. And so I was like, what the heck? Last night, so I threw it on while I was trying to go to sleep last night. And so I'm listening to this guy like go off about, I think it was like Amgen or something like that. And he's like clicking his pen and like making all the lip smacking noises, and it was weird. The thing that makes it hard for me to fall asleep though is I have my 1-year-old's foot inside my other ear. So I got my AirPods in this ear and my 1-year-old's foot in this ear, and that's what ultimately makes it hard for me to go to sleep. But I was surprised. They also had another one where the financial advisor, like a financial planner ASMR, and the guy's basically just giving like telling like stories about how he saves money and stuff like that, like wearing a suit and tie, but he's like whispering and like really like calm and relaxed. Yeah. So if you want to make some extra cash, maybe we should just cut this off and just like whisper our next performance report.
I'm just gonna quietly read a prospectus.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I mean, like
people, if you've never heard of this, a lot of people say that Bob Ross was the first ASM artist.
Yeah. Because
he talks real quietly, and all you hear is like the brush strokes on the page while he quietly relaxes you with his gentle speech. So that's the basic idea. If people out there are wondering what the heck we're talking about.
No, I think is that. We go through this hoopla with our Form ADV, which almost nobody reads. I think we should read it in whispers, like while somebody's clacking on the keyboard, and you just throw that in. And number one would be for clients, and number two, we could just mark it as ASMR ADV.
Yeah, there you go.
And we could probably get a couple million subscribers on YouTube.
I tell our clients all the time, before you go to the doctor for pills to cure insomnia, open up those disclosures that we send.
Yeah.
So Alex's next assignment is to read it in a deep, soothing voice while he's like clicking his pen and his cat's like rubbing the microphone or something. All right. I think that's plenty for today. All right. So we'll see you next week.